We're on. We're alive, everybody. I hope everyone's doing great today. This is a great, grandiose comeback of Learn Squirt streams. I have a very special guest today with me, Mr. Josh Darling. Am I pronouncing your name correctly?
You are. You've got it.
Awesome. So, just straight off the bat, I mean, we had a couple of minute conversation prior to the stream, but nice to meet you, man. I've been a user of DAZ 3D for I don't know how many years now, 10 years or something like that. No, not 10. I think 2010, 2011 is when I started using it professionally. So it's been 7, 8 years now of my professional use of the software. I've always been a fan, and this is gonna be an interesting one because DAZ for me specifically is pretty much like one of those tools that I use all the time. It's like my to go to for a lot of things. And even with my personal projects right now, I'm using DAZ 3D for pretty much all the setups for my characters and everything. So it's been like almost an integral tool. So yeah, it's really nice to have someone who can represent the company and talk more details about the software and everything. So
Hey, yeah, it's great to be here. It's great to meet someone who uses our stuff in such a great professional way. So I'm very excited.
thanks a lot, man. So yeah, let's maybe start with you, just to get you introduced. So whoever is joining us, on the stream today, is have a little bit of understanding who you are and what do you do at DAZ Studios and whatnot. So
Okay. Yeah. So I've been involved with DAZ since 2001, and
oh wow,
so it has been a long time. Um, it's been a good experience. I've been able to actually do a lot of different things. When I first hired on, I was working with an animation team, and then migrated into modeling and doing morph work and stuff, with our content, and then ended up in software for many years as a product manager, and then now I've made it back onto the content team, so I'm involved with rigging and sometimes some modeling and morph work.
hmm
So just kind of had a wide range of jobs here over the years. It's been a lot of fun.
nice. I mean, 2001. It's like 18 years, almost 17 years with one company. Wow,
It's been
must be real
quite a
fun
run.
there, huh?
Yeah, I love the people that we work with, and the stuff we do is awesome. So yeah, it's great.
Awesome, man. That's awesome. Yeah, so what I wanted to say is yeah, I mean, I remember so I'll start with this. So I remember when I stumbled upon DAZ 3D for the first time, um and I did that by working with my friend Marek Okon. I'll show the peeps who am I talking about right here. Just pulling it over. And Mark is a good friend of mine. We've known each other in like forever now. I think I met him for the first time back in 2007 ish, something like that. Because he came in for the interview over at Crytek, and when I was working over there, and we connected obviously right away because he was Polish and I'm Polish. So, but yeah, we talked about the the stuff that he's doing, and I was asking him question how he's approaching his work. He's always been talking about DAZ 3D, and I remember looking back at DAZ back then, in 2007 ish, and all I could see was like DeviantArt images, and those were like really questionable, to put it mildly.
Yes.
And it was just funny because I was just looking at like, dude, what the fuck? what am I looking at? But quickly, like I think if, like soon after, I just like dug in just to check it out. Like everything you see here. Like I'm not sure if the older work that he's been sharing is in DAS, but I would be surprised if it's not. But like the more recent ones, I think starting from like those right here, it's where he started using DAS 3D. So, and he's been using it. He's been using it like really, really well ever since. So I picked up on it. It was just like, I was sort of looking at the DeviantArt questionable, question mark, question mark. What am I looking at? Checking if my wife is not coming in to the room to not get embarrassed, that kind of stuff, It's like, all right, what are you watching there? Like a nerdy anime? Fox Tales and shit like that. You know what I mean? It's like just weird stuff. But, I remember, because I there's also a Poser. I don't know how connected you guys are with Poser, if it's a different company, but it's pretty much like very similar software. But what hooked me up with DAZ was like, hey, it's free, like right away. Right. It's just free. You don't have to buy anything to test it out. You just get on the site and download,
Yeah.
So
that was actually our goal. Was we actually started out just making content, and then we were making it mostly for the Poser market, but realizing that there was a barrier to entry there, that someone had to buy the software in order to use our content, we eventually ended up coming up with DAZ Studio and giving away for free, with the hope that then people would say, okay, this is easy to get into, let me try it out, and then go from there.
So that was a goal for the company, like from the very start, right? Just to get the just people hooked up with the software in the first place, and then go from there. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. It's looking at the markets. It was a very similar way of how Riot Games are doing their business. Like they have pretty much a free game. You download and you buy it. You download the game, you can play it for free. But if you want to get invested in it, like maybe have more skins of characters, or characters that are not expiring after 30 days, because there's a rotation of characters you can play. You just have to buy them, and that's how they make pretty much their whole business, like a small shopping sort of thing. So it's very similar in a way of how you guys are operating, because I'm assuming the store is bringing a lot of revenue for you guys specifically. So it's a smart way of working. So I know the software changed, and even looking at, I've made my class back in, like, now it's been 2 years, I think, 2.5 years since I made my Learn Squared class with it was futuristic character design. And so that class I made, 2 years ago now. And I remember when I started making it, the software was different. Like I think it was version 4.5 or maybe 4.4.
Right.
And that's been a while. And I think the characters that I was using for this one right here was Genesis 2. Yeah, it was definitely Genesis 2. So I'm showing the trailer for the class, but Genesis, and now when you go in DAZ Studio, it's like Genesis 8, So it's been a while now. So even in the last 2 years, there's just so many features and changes that happen to the software that obviously are really exciting. The new characters are actually seem to be better in terms of like rigging and everything. I obviously would want to dive more deeper into that as we talk more. But my question is, since you worked in the studio from 2001, like, what was your experiences? Pretty much the whole journey you had with the studio. You've seen pretty much the development of the whole thing from the start, right?
Right.
I'm just curious about that journey, because it's really interesting to see how software develops. I'm looking at Blender right now, and I remember looking at Blender a couple of years ago. It's like, I don't even want to touch it, and now it's like completely different software. Even I mean, 3ds Max is maybe a bad example because 3ds Max specifically is like a dinosaur. It just evolves over millions of years, you know.
Uh,
um, but it's just like, for me, it's really interesting to hear, you know, from a perspective of a developer, like, you know, your experiences with the software development. You know, and you can talk about anything here, obviously, but
mhm.
I'm just curious.
Well, it's funny because when I did first start, we had maybe one or two people on our team. I think we had about 16 or 17 people in the company, and one or two people on the team
Hmm.
had the ability to script. And so the tool set that we were using back then was pretty primitive. We were even working on old SGI computers, those blue boxes, Onyx or whatever they were. Really slow and horrible technology and everything. And then we would work and put all these hours into things, and finally started automating things a little bit more so that we could save time. And then finally we got to the point where we said, well, we need a software developer on this team. And so we started developing software and making plugins, and Lightwave was our software of choice for doing modeling and animation at the time.
Hmm.
And so we wrote some plugins and things for that. And then as we started doing Dev Studio, I just remember our ideal was, these are tools for the artists by the artists. We wanted
Right.
this to be the greatest experience ever. And and I remember trying to launch version 1 of Dev Studio was nearly impossible because as an artist, you don't want a single bug.
Yeah. You don't want any of the bad things to happen, right?
Room, a developer and one of our artists, and said, okay, you guys aren't coming out of this room until we have version 1. And they were going to just kick it out as fast as they could. They were going to find bugs and fix them as they found them. And it was just a great experience. And in the end, we said, no, we still can't launch. So eventually we matured a little bit with software and had all the right people aligned with the company, and started realizing that you do your best and move forward, and then continue to iterate. And that was, version 1 took so long to get out, and then now we're up to version 4.10. And as you mentioned a couple years ago, it was a little bit different with 4.5 in that range. When we went to 4.8, I think it was, we actually integrated Iray, NVIDIA's Iray render engine,
Hmm.
and that was a huge ordeal, of course, because switching render engines and changing the look of all your content. But what was really neat from that was it kind of legitimized a lot of the artists that we have, because the render engine that we were using before is a great render engine, but it's very technical and was great for people that knew all the technical details of how to do a render.
Right.
But with NVIDIA's Iray, it became, this PBR render, and it became much easier to just load and render and get great looking results. And so it definitely changed our galleries and and the level of the art that's being produced. And it was just great to see things evolve so quickly just in the past couple of years.
Yeah. It's been a big progress. I mean, I've seen Iray implementation happen, like in between from where I started with the class till today. I think it's just happened in the past couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a huge step, because that all of a sudden, like when I came back to the store, and I'm gonna pull it up again. It went from, I don't want to pull up anyone's DeviantArt work, because just I don't want to just be mocking people for
Mm-hmm.
bad work, obviously. But
Right.
now, even looking at the renders now, and a lot of those renders that I'm guessing some of the renders you see in the store would be renders done, in outside software.
Mm-hmm.
You take assets, you put it in Blender, Maya, 3ds Max, whatever, and then you render with like Octane, V-Ray. So that's I've seen that happen before. People
Mm-hmm.
using the assets and doing it that way. But then when you go on the store right now, you can actually see some of the renders to be done in with the IRA. So like, even if you just go in and look at the some of the store elements, some of them like look really realistic at the first glance. Like, man, like it's
Mm-hmm.
just so good from the get-go. And when you see that as an artist, you quickly, like, it just clicks in you. Oh yeah, I can actually actually use this for for more professional work, and in a completely different vein too. I think a good example of like really creative use of DAS would be Beeple, and obviously my friend Ash Torp. I'll pull both of those guys up. Beeple is I'm gonna have Beeple on the podcast tomorrow actually. Let me show you his everydays. But Beeple, I remember he took my class actually. My futuristic character design class, and he was using like right after he finished the class, because I remember him, talking about the class, and we talked about the class a lot. Like he had some questions, some technical questions, obviously. But he was just also like, man, like this is awesome, and then all of a sudden he starts posting stuff like that where he never used characters before, So to me it was like, wow, man, like this is really cool. So Beeple is, I don't know if you've seen his work before, and I don't know if you know who he is, but he's one of those dudes that he became really popular from posting an artwork every day for past. Right. I think he made this year. He passed the 10-year anniversary. So yeah, there you go. There he actually has a counter. How many days he's been doing them? 4,054 days.
That's
of doing
dedication.
Artwork. Yeah, I had him on the stream before, and we talked about it. It's just like, yeah, I just put up time and just make it happen. But him, and then obviously my friend Ash. I'll pull up his work right here. Like this kind of stuff here. Obviously there's some V-Ray going on there. Oh, not V-Ray. He's actually using Octane. There's some ZBrush and everything like that, but I know how Ash works, and he's definitely using DAZ 3D for that kind of stuff where it doesn't even look like DAZ 3D. Like put this up in the stores, like what is this,
Right.
But yeah, that is, and it's just like it's so easy to make film quality, like the top of the top quality work with this, and it just makes it so easy. I mean, I've been hooked ever since. I know it almost sounds like being like a fanboy, but really, I mean, it's really so good. I rarely get excited about software. There's certain pieces of software that I just been using for a while, and I admire. Like V-Ray, for me, is like, I cannot imagine working with the other software. Like I work with Octane for rendering and V-Ray, but the V-Ray is like my to-go-to for pretty much everything, because it's just like, it's such a good tool for rendering. And it's the same with DAZ 3D. Like with the 3D software, I could argue saying like, I specifically use 3ds Max, but hey, like I could definitely see myself using Cinema 4D and Maya and everything, but with there's a couple of pieces that are just irreplaceable for me. So I'm excited for what's to come, and obviously gonna have questions if there's anything in the development that you can spill the beans about.
Oh yeah, that's interesting. I'll have to think about that one.
But yeah, like we can talk about that. Obviously, I have a question that is. I do have quite a few questions in terms of good practice for from technical point of view.
Okay.
Obviously, so I'll definitely want to jump into that. Yeah, maybe let's do that, because obviously my workflow specifically is, I work with 3ds Max, and I sometimes work with Cinema 4D. Sometimes I used to work with Modo, not anymore, but every software has like its own workspaces and just different ways of how we organize files and everything.
Right.
And I know you guys started, working a lot with Maya specifically in terms of integration. I just want to learn, I guess, figure out the proper ways of, how to connect those software together. Because I figured out, like, for instance, DAZ 3D and ZBrush, there's a GoZ plugin that works pretty well, right?
Right.
But I've noticed one thing, for instance, with ZBrush specifically. So let me actually open DAZ 3D. It's right here. I have a model ready. So if you go to GoZ, so you can send it over to ZBrush. I'm just using default settings that are out there. But I know for a fact that if you pull up the model, right? So you have if you pull it up to like 3ds Max or Maya, and you look at the shading groups or material groups, right?
Right.
Like the face itself, even just the face itself has, there's a face, there are lips, there are ears. I think the back of a head is connected to torso.
Right.
But then also you have like the eye socket itself.
Correct.
Which when you go to, I believe when you go to, there we go. So when you just like go Z, that thing doesn't have any polygroups, right? Just from the get-go. And, I guess that's the way it works over here in ZBrush. But let me see. I might be actually wrong when I'm talking about this, but yeah, go ahead.
My understanding is actually that and I'd have to double check. I use GoZ usually just to send my mesh over and then do some sculpting and bring it back. I know that when we export an OBJ and then we bring that into ZBrush directly, not using the GoZ bridge, it throws out the material groups, but then it keeps the face groups. I don't know. There are some export options that we have if we're going to OBJ, but I'm not sure with the GoZ what it does there.
Gotcha. So the proper way here, or like a safe way here, would be to export OBJs instead, and then import them in ZBrush. Because I know if you export OBJ specifically, and you import it in ZBrush, you're gonna have the polygroups. But the face itself is still like, it's gonna be a face and lips. They're gonna have like all of those things I've described gonna be there. But like the eye sockets, they are still like connected to the face.
Right. So, and actually, I don't have this out there publicly yet, but it is available, and some people have requested it. So a lot of times people run into issues where the inner mouth and teeth and everything get messed up while they're sculpting. And so just because of the way things are done, when we UV map our human figures, we have the mouth, inner mouth, the face, all that stuff connected, and the ears. It's all connected, so it's easier to texture. But a lot of people like to, freeze that mesh so that they're not going to modify it when they're sculpting. Yeah. And so I actually have another UV set where I separate the inner mouth from the lips, so that people can then group the mesh by UV boundaries, and then they're able to avoid messing with the inner mouth. So there are various tricks like that.
So, can you show me how it works?
Oh man, I don't have it set up. I would love to. Sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay. So
on this machine, at least, I don't have it set up.
So what you're saying is, what I'm guessing is you would have, I guess, the same model, and would it be like a plugin that you apply to the model itself, or is it like a separate model? So that you have specifically for that. So like inside of the DAZ 3D environment.
Yeah, and you won't have it on this one because I haven't given it to you yet. But if you went to the surfaces pane, and it looks like I'm not sure what layout you're using.
I might be using something different. Surfaces. There it is.
So that surfaces pane, and you can dock that on the right side if you want by grabbing that surfaces tab and then dropping it over by that environment tab,
Yep.
or right
There we
there.
go.
Yeah. So if you click on Genesis 3 female over there on the left, and then you can just type in that search field at the top of the filter field on the right, up one. There you go. If you just type UV in there. If you move your mouse, sometimes it freaks out when you try to search.
Yeah, I've noticed.
So you have UV sets, and we have various ones. This is Genesis 3 that you're working with. And so we were doing customized UV sets per character, so you had less distortion and everything like that.
Gotcha.
So we would have an alternate UV set in there that separates that mouth. And then you would just make sure that is the active UV set when you send your content over through GoZ.
Oh, okay. So you would basically just use it almost like a plugin that you plug into a character, and you just make sure it's selected properly from that surfaces pane, and then it should work. Yeah, because I've noticed, like, sometimes there's certain things you sometimes want to do. Like, for instance, you might get like a 3D scan of a model, and you would really want to get your 3D like your DAS character as close to it as possible. And you can do it with ZBrush quite easily. You just you just do a projection, right? You just make sure that the major shapes are somewhat in the proximity of where it's supposed to be projected, right? And then you just do a projection. But yeah, as you said, like the mouth, the teeth, and everything, that's gonna project on the surface as well, and the mouth starts to look like Freddy Krueger's face,
Right. Yeah, it's not very pleasant.
Yeah, exactly. But that's interesting. Yeah, I'll definitely bug you for getting that different UV sets, because that obviously is going to help. But for like an average person, how would you separate it then? Let's say if you have those UV sets right here, how would you go with separating them so that you can actually use that, use that model, and you just apply a difference, or like modify it so that you can apply it to your model?
So if in DAZ Studio itself, if you select the correct UV set and then you go through GoZ and send it over to ZBrush, then there's an option in there for grouping by UV, and so that's all you really have to do on the DAZ Studio side. Is then once your mesh is over there in ZBrush and you've broken it out by the UVs, then you can tell it to not affect certain mesh or whatever, and then that's one way you can do it. But there are tools in DAZ Studio. We're not a modeler. Really, what we are is we try to supply content, 3D assets, and people bring those in, and then we give them the ability to use preset content such as morph shapes or blend shapes, as a lot of people call them, or clothing or hair, all those different add-ons that you can get. So we don't really do a lot of modeling in here, but one tool that we do have is we have a geometry editor where you can go in and you can select geometry. So I mean, if your mouth got all distorted when you were doing your work, or your eyes or whatever, you could always just back in here in DAZ Studio just select that geometry, and then there's an action where it'll remove the morph information from that selected geometry. Right. And so that's a way to clean it up too, so then you don't have to necessarily worry about it over in ZBrush.
Right, because when you export to ZBrush, when you export back to, and I guess the easiest way is just to go Z back to DAZ 3D, because then it automatically, especially if it's the same base model, it will automatically ask you, if you want to update the model itself, or if you want to apply like a morph, and it'll ask you like with the location and everything. That's pretty straightforward. I'm guessing if there's a way of selecting, let's say if I don't want to do it through GoZ, but instead of upload or import the OBJ itself and use it as a morph, how would you go about it?
To load a morph?
Like use OBJ as a morph when you're loading the OBJ to DAZ Studio.
Okay, so assuming that you've already exported that out and gone into ZBrush and done your work, and then you've got an OBJ now from ZBrush that has a new shape, then what you do is you just have your figure loaded here, and then with it selected, we have under the Edit menu, there's Morph Loader Pro. Let's see, it's under Edit, Figure, or Object, either one.
Oh,
and then there should be Morph Loader Pro. And so that'll launch this dialog, and this is actually the same dialog that GoZ has if you show the advanced options. And basically, basically here you just browse to your file, your OBJ. So that's a choose more files button just a little above where your mouse is, or you can drag and drop them in.
Project object, right? That's
actually no, that's a little different, and we don't need to go into that one because it's just kind of left over from a decade ago. But to the left of there is a choose more files option.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Okay.
So then you just browse to your OBJ and select it.
See if it works.
Now the settings that you're going to use largely depend on what you're doing. So
let's see if this one works. There we go.
Give it a try. So if you actually, the default options probably will work. So you can try just hitting accept and see what happens.
There's preset. So I guess you can save project and they will save it as preset.
Well, so that project stuff on the right is actually we used to load in dozens or hundreds of morphs at a time. And every once in a while we'd find there was a problem. So we would actually go and have to reload them again. And that's really tedious when you're setting up. So that project stuff is actually just so you can have, if you were loading 10, 20, 50 of them, it would basically save out that configuration. Looks like it loaded. So if you hit OK and then you go to your parameters pane, and then on the left side there, you click morphs and it'll show up right there. Yes.
There we go. It actually works.
Yeah. So it gives you, by default, it gives you the ability to go negative 100% or positive 100%. So you get the opposite of your morph or you get your morph. Yeah, either way.
Hey, let's play with it. Actually, you can change those parameters, I know.
Yes, you can.
Boom. Oh my God.
What's funny is, sometimes we'll find that when you have this great feminine looking morph that you've built, and then you dial it in a negative and she starts becoming really masculine. You're realizing, that that jawline generally is just the opposite for the male as it is for the female. So
yeah, that's so cool.
You get some really good stuff.
Yeah, it's pretty creative, isn't it? I mean, this is like freaking, and then you get the head, you scale it up. It's a monster creator. You don't need ZBrush, man. You can just
it's pretty weird.
Creatures. That's so funny. Yeah, I remember Ash, because I talk with Ash pretty much all the time, and when he started using Daz 3D for the first time, I got him hooked up with Daz 3D like really, really seriously, because he never used it before. And he would just like constantly ask me like really rudimental questions, but that's normal, like you learn. And then he would just send me those screenshots every now and then with like like stuff like that. Like, what did I do?
It's the tool it's homegrown. And generally advanced users were the ones that were using it all the time a long time ago. And so, and we grew with it. And so it's funny when you bring new people into it and they jump in and you realize, wow, there's so much depth that they would have to understand to even know why it's doing something like this.
Right. Right. Okay. And by the way, guys, whoever is listening to us now, and, you guys have been, I see you guys talking and that's fun. Whenever you have any questions, please, just ask any questions you want. I'll go over like QA with Josh towards the end of the stream. And like any questions you have, just keep asking. We'll go over them. Just put like a, just type question and then question before actual question so we can actually see it. It's gonna be easier to see it. in the chat itself instead of just searching where it is. But anyways, so my second question would be, and I'm sort of like going through a laundry list almost. Is because I obviously like to work. So my workflow is very simple. I go from DAZ 3D. If I need a costume, then I'll export it towards, I will export OBJ and whatnot, and then put it right into Marvelous Designer. And then, do my garments in Marvelous Designer, and then get everything back to 3ds Max, most likely, and then, work my scene over there. But there's one thing that I always run into. Like, there's certain problems that I run into almost every time, and I'm pretty sure that this is happening because I'm just an idiot.
We'll hope.
I'm just making really stupid mistakes. And it's usually, so the first problem is usually scale. So if I export from DAZ, right? Like if I go into export, let's just type 2, and I get all those settings. There's custom settings. There's like actually quite a lot of presets, and I just never know which preset to use, what kind of settings to use. And sometimes you just click something and all of a sudden when you import it to Marvel's Designer, like the scale of it is,
right,
out of whack. So
yeah,
like for instance,
that's tough.
Can you see that? Like for instance, if I go to Maya, the scale by default is 100%, but for whatever reason, the max default is 1%.
Right.
So that works with Max, because if I import that to Max, it works. But if I import that to Marvel's Designer, the character is going to be tiny. Let me actually see if I can load it up. I am going to kill the screen for a second, because I want to make sure that I'm not showing any works, so people don't see it. Okay, that should work. Yeah, I think if I import that, so there's like obviously, I'm just using default settings. I wonder if it's gonna work, but sometimes if I don't choose 3ds Max, if I choose between 3ds Max or any other, yeah, there we go. Like, where the heck is the character? Like, I can't even see it.
Yeah,
it's probably so tiny.
That's tough. We don't.
Yeah, there it is. I found it.
Wow. Oh, there it is. Yeah, there it is.
Wait, I lost it.
Yeah, so
Yay.
Our scale presets there are, based on what the software's unit of measurement is, right? So,
so what would be a good practice then? Like, what are the default settings that kind of works as a universal default settings for DAZ 3D specifically? Because then, like, if it's all out of whack in, let's say, in 3ds Max specifically, then in 3ds Max I can always scale it up. Just grab the selection, type in the number that I need to type in. Like if it's too small, I'm gonna just it's usually by tenfold increments. So if it's 1%, then I guess, like, let's see, if I export this as 100% and go into Marvel's Designer. One thing that you guys added, or the Marvel's Designer added, actually, by the way, guys, is like they added these default settings for skinning and everything. Is freaking awesome for like the garment. They didn't have that. They added it recently. And it just like aligns with the DAZ models like really well just from the get-go. I guess if I export as 100%, you will at least see a character, I think. I mean, you can always auto scale. Oh, yeah, there we go. It's still too small. So, but that's specifically 3ds Max settings. So I wouldn't be bothered about that. But if you go to export, then you have like all of those settings available here. Would you just use DAZ Studio settings as a default, or?
I tend to use that by default, even though some of my modelers scale it differently. Maybe try. I can't remember. It's been a while since I've gone in Marvelous Designer, and I don't remember what settings people use for that. So you might just have to try it and see. That's the thing is, once you do find a setting that works for you, then you can save your preset and say, name
right
it
here.
Marvelous Designer, and now from now on you can have that working. And I know that our forum, if I asked some people, I would get the exact number and what settings, if it was X, Y, and Z, the same rotation or the same order as we do, or if it's like Max where you have to invert one of them, or
Right.
we'd have to find all that out. But I think the only thing you have to change for that is the scale.
The scale, yeah. Yeah,
And it
the
looks
scale
like
would be the one.
100% wasn't right, so.
But it's weird. Like, let's see. Let's actually put it in a test. Like, if it's DAZ Studio 100%, it should technically work well.
Yeah, I think it'll be that size, but it'll be oriented differently. But
I don't know. I think it's gonna be actually the right size and oriented
that'd be
correctly.
nice.
Because I think the 3ds Max was like 1 unit per meter, and this is like 1 unit per centimeter. And actually, you're right. So I'm guessing like for Marvel's Designer specifically, you would just import with like 1,000%. You can out of scale, or you can just change the scale right here.
Right.
The 1,000% should work because it's like 10 times the size.
Yeah, dealing with scale in all the different programs is always kind of crazy. If we go 100%, yeah, that's pretty much.
Let's see, like those are you snap the garment to character like here, and those are like already set up for you. This is pretty good. Anyways, so I guess my other question would be, because obviously this is just like a standard pose, but let's say I want to do like an animation. Let me see if there are any animations here. I don't even remember how to animate. But anyways, like you have an animation, right, of a character doing something, and you can export it. You can export by, I guess the question is, how do you export that? So it's actually retaining all the information, because I'll tell you what issue I had with my class is with the Genesis 2 characters, you would go with, I think Collada worked pretty well. But like with Genesis 3, if you would export with Collada, you would have like those weird bending issues, like with the character like have a different position of a hand. Right. That hand would like in the forearm would have like weird bend. It almost looked like a tangent between between two joints.
Yeah, so Collada was our format of choice for years, but we ended up having to go away from that just because some various issues that came up. So I don't think it ever was updated to support Genesis 3 or above.
Oh, gotcha. So you would want to avoid it from that point, I guess.
Yeah.
If you want to do like a proper export. So what would you go with then?
So you could go with FBX, and I think our FBX export actually even has a Collada export. I'm not positive how that works, but by using the FBX SDK, we have other formats that we support through that as well. But actually, one thing that you're seeing here, okay, there you go. Perfect.
Interesting.
Yeah. So one of the minor confusions that came up while you were looking at those animations was we actually have down at the bottom there with your timeline, you have animate light, and then you have the timeline. Those animations that were playing when you just moused over them,
they were in animate light, right?
Those were actually animate ones. And so if you applied that animation, it would show up in animate, but it wouldn't actually export to FBX. So if you are using animations that don't seem to be showing up in FBX properly, then what you do is you get it in your animate timeline right here, and then you can right click on the above the timeline in there. Do it on the tab there like you were doing. Uh, oh, actually, where is that? Maybe you do it next to that shoe over on the right. See how there's a
Oh, bake to
yep.
studio keyframes.
Yeah, and once you bake that to studio keyframes, then if you go into the regular timeline, then that is actually keyframes. Um,
Oh, okay.
and that's where the separation was coming in.
Gotcha. Okay, that's good
Now
to
this
know.
would export to FBX or whatever. So we do have the
Let's try it.
FBX export with animation. You also have Alembic export, which is more of, I don't know how useful that is. Basically, it bakes it out kind of like an MDD type thing where it's just deformations and you don't have bone data or anything like that. So Alembic is another way you can export animations if you were doing it and all you wanted to do was render in another application.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, Dev Studio, it has some animation tools. We try to give presets and things like that, but it's not a super advanced animation tool. So generally, it seems like people might tend to take that into Max or whatever, or Motion Builder and animate there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I know like if you export, even if you know when I was exporting with Collada, it would retain the bone information, so I could actually in Max use select each of the bones and actually do animations with them. So that was kind of cool. And I
Mm-hmm.
even saw I remember watching someone doing exports where some of the settings for like the facial morphs would be preserved in I think was Max even where
Mm.
like the dialogue for facial morphs was there,
Hmm.
but he had like a specific tutorial how to set it up. It was kind of interesting, like literally the same settings you guys have for morphing.
Uh-huh.
If when you export it from DAZ to, I guess like with the specific settings, you would be able to preserve that information and load it up in the different software. So that was kind of
Yeah.
cool.
So we have in our FBX export dialog, it gives you the ability to choose how many morphs or blend shapes you want to actually carry
Hmm.
out into the FBX format. Because, as you know from working with our characters, we give you a stock human figure, but then you end up with hundreds of different shapes and everything. And you may not want to have all of those in 3ds Max because it might be kind of heavy. It might not perform so
Right.
well. And so in the FBX export dialog, you actually
Let me pull it
uh,
up.
you can create rules there and say, okay, well, and I think by default, so
So which one would you choose? I guess 2014, huh? Would be
yeah,
the one to go
yeah,
with.
there are minor changes in the format. So I think
We don't need
14 would
lights
be
and
the
camera.
best.
No props. Props, I guess it would just would be like the wardrobe, right?
Actually, in this case, I don't think you have any props in there, but yeah, you can leave it. It doesn't hurt anything. So in that list at the bottom there, if you can see the Genesis 8 female is listed. She's the second one there, and if you
Yeah,
expand
one of the
her,
changes. Sorry to
oh
interrupt
yeah,
you,
go
but
ahead. Yeah.
I really want to mention that because it's really important. Like you actually finally made the eyelashes as a separate model. It's so good.
Right. There's some good things that come from it for sure. We like that, but it kind of throws some people off. So
Yeah,
now
but
you
that
see,
was a good change. Anyways.
well, that's good to know. That's good to have that feedback. Um, so that gives you a list of all the different morph properties that are on that figure, and you
Hmm.
can see it says not used next to most of those. And so if you scroll down a ways, eventually you'll find, but it's a really long list, but eventually you'll find
Oh yeah, there we
the
go.
visms. There you go. So you have, those are some actual morphs for joint corrections. And then further down, there will be all these visms and everything for facial animation. Those kind of things will be set by default to export with it. But if you click, and this gets super complex, but if you click up above there,
Right
there's
here.
the edit. Yeah, the edit morph export rules. So in there, you can see any of the visms is what it was exporting. That's the CTRL VS. We put little. We like to have a prefix on our morphs that separates them. So when we're looking
Hmm.
at them, we know what they're for. And so if you said, actually, I want all the head morphs, then you could actually add a new rule down there. So if you go down left on the left side, there's an add button, and you click that, and then it adds a new one. I think.
Yeah, there is name one
yeah,
bake.
and then you can edit those settings. And what you can do is you can for the match you can edit that to be .fhm, and now all the head morphs should be set. And that action is bake, so you'd actually want to change that to export. So bake basically means that now it becomes part of the shape. But if you do export, then it should write out all the different morphs. And then now if you accept that and you look at that list, it should be updated. So if you scroll down a little ways, it's a super long list, but it would be towards the top.
So FHM would be for the head, like dot FHM.
Yeah. So
where do you find those
FHM
rules, by the way?
Well, I don't think we have anything really published, but so this list that you're seeing, you'll see it'll say under name, it'll say head.25 whatever. So that head means what node, what bone is the morph is on. And so those aren't going to be used, but if you scroll up, you'll have the figure's name. It'll say Genesis 8 female. So that's your section right there. And then it should have your FHMs popping up along in here. And it looks like there's some that's not catching. So maybe it cares about casing. So maybe you have to do capitalize FHM. I can't remember.
Yeah, let's check.
So it's I haven't messed with these filters in a little bit.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, definitely cares about. Yeah, that worked.
Perfect. So that way you can go in and set certain ones, or you can actually even put a whole name in there. If you say, okay, I want this morph in there for sure, but I don't want any of the other ones. So you can set up a bunch of rules there, and then that way.
So that way, let's say if you export the animation and you're like, I'm completely happy with the facial expressions. I don't need bones or anything related to that. You just set up a rule, FHM for head specifically, or you just go down the list to check, like, okay, the eye and face animations are under like, X, Y, or Z, right? And then you just type it in. You select bake. So here you just select bake, accept, and in that term, when you export your FBX, those will be just baked into morphs, right?
Yeah. So okay. You have a few options there. And one thing to keep in mind with our FBX export is, this Genesis 8 figure actually has 66 bones in the face for a face rig.
Wow.
So it's a little overkill if you don't use a face rig, right? And now most of our expressions and facial morphs are actually using those bones. And so when you export to FBX, I think we did this just to make it more compatible with various apps out there, but we actually convert those from bone movements to just a shape. So if it was using 10 bones to make that shape, it's just going to become a morph that is just moving the geometry instead of actually using the bones. So those face bones don't necessarily have to be used in another app. You can just you'll end up with morphs that are baked from the result.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, so the FBX, let me actually try to see if I can load it up here in Marvel's Designer specifically, but yeah, there is an option to load it up. I haven't been using FBX yet, because I was still like under impression of, maybe I should still use Collada or do like an OBJ sequence or something. You know what I mean?
Right. Okay, now in the past year, we've done some improvements to our FBX. It used to be just OBJ was our format of choice, but obviously sometimes you want rigging. So FBX is the one that we've been using the most. But it's funny, even though it's a standard, it's using dual quaternion skinning, which isn't supported in there. FBX being a standard, unfortunately, every app still chooses how they want to integrate it. And so something that works great in Maya, for instance, or Motion Builder, it may import badly in 3ds Max. So it's kind of tough trying to make sure that it works in every single application.
Now,
So
let
I'll
me
be
see if it
interested to
works
see.
with Max properly. But yeah, I'm curious. I mean, obviously, it's gonna take time to load.
Yeah, that'll have a lot of head morphs because I think you have a lot on your in your account there for the figure. So um,
Yeah, it did
so
not export properly. I can tell like the animation is not
yeah, it looks like it's messing
weird.
up a little bit.
Like, see, some of the bones are just stationary for
So
whatever
now
reason.
now that there's an option in FBX, I think, to basically merge the clothing in with the figure. Because
Oh, so
the way
that's for the clothing specifically?
yeah,
Oh, okay.
because we have, the way we do things in DAZ Studio is the clothing is configured to, it has its own bones,
Mm-hmm.
and then those bones follow the bones on your Genesis figure. So I think in FBX when you export, you can tell it to merge those together so that it's more standard on how people usually do it in other applications.
Right. But I'm guessing like the proper way would be going with the FBX in that term anyways. Okay, I
Yeah,
just loaded right here. Well, this is huge now.
yeah. So it's huge. Um,
But
the
it should show in the animation.
Oh, it did something weird. Yeah, that's not
Yeah.
exactly what we're going for.
No. No, no,
Yeah,
no.
it'd be interesting to play with this, get this pipeline figured out for you.
Yeah, exactly. Because that's one of the things. I mean, if I export that and like I'm pretty sure if I would import that in Maya, it should work. Because
Hmm.
I've seen tutorials with people doing that. It's
Right.
just like every software has its own like nook and crannies and
Yeah.
different kinds of support. But so let me
Right.
go over the options real quick. If I'm going to FBX, so if I don't want to keep the bones, right? Like let's say, okay, I'm I'm just assuming that the animation that I have is going to be the animation from DAS 3D. I'm not gonna edit it. Let me just have everything baked in, so I don't have
Hmm.
to care about anything in particular. How would you set up the FBX for that specifically? So you just export almost. It's almost like as you said, alembic way of exporting.
So our FBX export actually doesn't do that kind of export, unfortunately.
So what
So
would you use
you'll
then?
always end up with the bone data. Now, I
Which
think, let's see if you have Alembic. I can't remember if that's included or if that's something we
just
sell. There is MDD, but um, yeah, Alembic must be an extra plugin that you have to get. Uh, and then that one does give you a file that can import into Max or Maya or whoever else supports Alembic format.
there it is. Alembic export.
Okay.
So you would just basically get that plugin instead and use that
Right.
one. Okay. I already have. I should already have it. I think. I might just have to download that stuff.
Hmm.
Okay. So I guess that just gives you a different file format, and
Mm-hmm.
you would just use that file format for everything else. Okay, that kind of works. Yeah, I'm curious. I gotta need to test, and do some tests and figure out, different settings. And there's like merge, diffuse and opacity, like merge clothing into figure skeleton. That I guess that would just makes that the cloth has the same skeleton as the figure, right?
Yeah, it should. Yeah, they should combine, so they should follow properly. Um,
I
yeah, and
wonder
that
if what's the CTRL VS. That's I guess for everything, right? The
that
export.
no, that's actually just the Vism, so it'll have your mouth shapes,
Oh, okay.
and that's all it would export.
Gotcha. So maybe because I'm curious. Because you you showed me that, you know, the FHMs would be for the head.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's what it is. Like maybe you have to add specifically those, you know, ECTRLs or any of those nodes and to be exported. I'll be curious to check that out.
There are a lot of options.
I'll experiment.
Here. Yeah, that'd be great. It would be good to find out. And I can always go and check and see if we can get a pipeline figured out. You're right, though. We test a lot with Maya, and mostly that was just the customer base that we were trying to reach. Mm-hmm. And so you can even see custom Maya helper scripts option there. That actually makes it so that when you export the figure, it will hook it up properly so we have morphs that correct the joints when you bend, because dual quaternion is great, but it has issues by itself, so you can't just rely on the skinning. And so we make morphs that make the custom shape for when the leg bends, for instance. That Maya helper script option means that it'll write out some mel scripts that when you load the FBX into Maya, it should then go and hook things up, and then it'll bend the same in Maya as it does in DAZ Studio. So it'd be really neat if we could do the same thing with 3ds Max or any other application.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm curious because like one of the things that I specifically love to use whenever I'm working with any software is like this ability to sort of like seamlessly, you know, operate between softwares instead of just using export and import all the time, which, you know, specifically, let's say if you're working on a character model and you're doing some editing in ZBrush and whatnot, and, you know, with ZBrush, I guess the morphing between ZBrush and DAZ specifically, it's working really fine because, you know, I've morphed my models quite a lot already, and they worked out really well for what I needed, right? Like even this character right here that I have. Let me see if I can oops. I mean, just even from the get-go, by the way, like if I load up the DAZ 3D model, like it's already have, you know, materials and everything, and that works out really well. For like a really quick stuff, you just pose it, put it in a software and render, and it works really well.
Yeah.
Unhide all. I know I have like 20 different things here per pieces. But yeah, like what I would do, and that's sort of like the workflow. Yeah, there we go. Like 20 different characters on top of one another. That's the nature of me testing stuff. Making sure stuff works. 4 jackets.
Wow, yeah. Staying warm.
Exactly. You know. A little headpiece right here. But anyways, yeah, I mean the way I used to work for like morphing or making sure like the jacket that I made in Marvel's Designer, you know, gets properly draped around the character, I would just export like the base sort of like T-pose, then the final pose, and sort of like maybe 1 or 2 in between, so that, you know, specifically if you have like a lot of arm bending and stuff like that, so that it doesn't make the cloth go haywire, you know, specifically.
And you would export
like
those in OBJ format?
Is that yeah, and then in Marvel's Designer, if you go to Marvel's Designer options, yeah, this is funny. This looks really funny. I want to figure it out, because like if I figure out you know, I'm gonna try Alembic, and I'm pretty sure that's probably gonna work, because someone on the chat already mentioned that Alembic might be the way to go. But if I would figure out like how to get my animation in DAZ 3D and then have it exported properly, so I can, you know, use my Marvelous Designer to, you know, put the gloves on, because like once you have it here, and, you know, you have your T-pose. This is weird. It's actually really weird, because it might be Marvel's Designer, honestly. Because like when I imported, it was in a different pose, and I reverted, and it's still like weird pose and whatnot. So I'll I'll try to figure it out. But the idea is pretty simple. And it might be actually scale as well that has something to do with it. But the idea is that, you know, you have your T-pose, you put the clothes on, like you design clothes around the character, and then, you know, you go to the animation, and then you just animate the whole thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end of it, you can just change the resolution of the cloth itself, and it's all gonna be like almost baked in. So you can then export that stuff back to 3ds Max or, you know, Maya, whatever you're using, and have that whole animation with the cloths moving, and, you know, you have your wind controllers and everything right here. So you can do like a full simulation inside this software, and then put it back in you know, to your 3ds Max and whatever, and render it out, and you can have like a full blown animation that works really well. So, but now it's like, for me now it's like a static images, because I need to figure out the workflow, obviously. But that's always been like, you know, something I wanted to figure out. So I guess I'll just keep bugging you offline.
Yeah, definitely. We'll figure it out.
Yeah. I think that would be a good thing to do, because I'm gonna play around as much as I can, and once I figure it out, I maybe just gonna have you invited again, so we can actually go around all those specific issues and go like really in depth, you know, discussing like how we actually came to conclusion that that's the way to work. So that would be a good one. If you would be down to join again for any of the future streams.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Cool. All right. We have a couple of questions, and I have like millions of questions, but I don't want to go over time. I obviously have to work too. And I'm pretty sure you're going to have a busy day. Let's get through a couple of questions from the fans that been asking them as we're, you know, talking. And then we'll wrap it up after that. How about that?
That sounds great.
Cool. All right, let's go and start with any plans on integration Mixamo and exporting animations any easier. I guess the animation exporting is something we already discussed, but Mixamo is, I believe, the new Adobe stuff for characters. It's almost like
I think it's mostly online, right? It's not.
Yeah, it's like Adobe's DAZ 3D sort of kind of thing.
Yeah, I know that people have experimented with taking our stuff in there. I don't know of any current plans for improving that pipeline, but it's certainly something that we can talk about. But no, I don't know of any current plans on that.
Gotcha. Another question was, is there any tips and tricks for using DAZ along Blender 3D? But since I don't use Blender, I'm not going to be able to answer anything. But what about, did you guys work with anyone who's using Blender?
Yes, we have several artists in our community that use it. And so as far as tips and tricks with that, I don't have any personally because I haven't been using Blender. But I know that some people use it in their pipeline for sculpting their morphs in there, or even so some people use it for the content creation side, right? They'll create their morphs that they're going to load into DAZ Studio, but other people actually take our assets from DAZ Studio into Blender and then animate and do whatever else there. So I guess I can find out, but there is a community that does use both, and so there should be some good information out there. And the pipeline does seem to work as far as I've seen.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, it's probably the same thing as in with, you know, what we've been discussing with 3ds Max. You know, you're always gonna stumble upon some technical difficulties because how different the software are. Like I was trying Blender recently, and it's just like, I was like, oh my god, like I don't know how I'm gonna like even approach that to learn it, you know, because like the UI is so different.
right
Like even just starting there.
I want to use Blender, but finding the time to learn another software, you know, it's just kind of difficult. But
yeah, I'll tell you one thing, like there's, you know, I haven't seen anything, and you know, I might be oblivious and sort of like in my own 3ds Max bubble, but I haven't seen anything in Blender specifically that I cannot do in Max just yet.
Mm.
So, that kind of stuff. So I
Yeah.
usually put like a large question mark. Is this software going to significantly improve my workflow and make it so that it's really much easier for me to work, So,
Right. Yeah, I know that one of our artists, when they're doing skin textures, they use Blender for when they're doing their
mhm.
painting and trying to fix seams that you get when you're painting textures. Anyway, so I know that people in our group here of artists, we have hundreds of artists that create content that we sell in our store, and I know that at least a few of them use Blender. So, it's. But yeah, if you have a tool like 3ds Max that does everything, you kind of have to find justification to add another application to your pile there.
Exactly. Because like I'm looking at what I like. This is my like shader setup that I did, to make it look like pretty much an anime, right? And it's still like maybe 20% done because there's so many things that I need to fix with it. The way it behaves and test it with the animations, all of that stuff. It's gonna be like a long journey, but it's a fun one. But it's like everything that I need is here.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much everything. Obviously, I still need that 3D. I
Right.
need my Marvel's designer, but like I have 3 pieces of software that I know really well, and I don't have to. It's like, yes, I could probably solve some of the technical issues that I have with Blender quite much easier, but I'm 100% sure that the things that I already can do in 3ds Max really well would take me forever to set up in a different software. So there's always a trade-off. So
Right.
doom 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 doom. Let me go through a few more.
Yeah, and by the way, just as you're looking for questions, I apologize that I don't have great answers for those two so far. That's anytime we're integrating with another system, if it's something I use, then I can obviously speak better about it. But if it's something I'm not using in my daily work, then I have to
I
kind of
mean,
just guess.
when I invited you to the stream, I was not expecting you to be a Wikipedia. So
Well, that's good. Yeah, that's appreciated.
yeah, like there's certain things, like even I had Curtis Chan from Fusion 360. I don't know if you know Fusion 360. It's like
Hmm.
it's basically 3D CAD software,
Hmm.
and I
Yeah.
use it for pretty much everything that is related to hard surface modeling. And I would just grill and drill and just ask most difficult questions to Curtis, because he's the evangelist. He knows a lot about the software. And half of
Right.
the answers would be like, "Oh man, like you caught me off guard." But it's just like it's normal, Like there's certain things and there's certain things you don't. Like you're one of them, one of you are part of the company, but you're not, I guess, you know, um, gosh, like there's when you work for a company, your specifics, and there's just
Right.
so many things that you need to learn asking different developers to actually get those answers. But hey, like the purpose of the stream is to get those questions out, so that even if when you go back to your daily works and whatnot, and you might be talking with the some of the programmers, like, hey, I got that questions all the time, like maybe we should do something about it, or there's just so many things that can be done. I always look at it that way. I look at the opportunities to talk with developers whenever I can, and this is like one of those where working, how do you work with Max, and you give me an answer, you might find an answer, and looking at the FBX export specifically, like there's so many things for me to actually now to explore, because I wasn't even aware that they exist,
Right.
and for me to like really go back and forth and figure out, like, okay, maybe there's some settings that are within the FBX itself that I can play with and get the right results, because I was not aware of any of that. Like I was aware there is a FBX export, but that's
Hmm.
pretty much it.
Right. Right.
And I never played with the settings. Now I have an incentive to actually try and do something. But now, how many 3D softwares are out there? Like we have Max, Maya, Blender, Lightwave, freaking Cinema 4D, Modo. There's just so many. It's impossible to make everything work seamlessly in between, so
Yeah.
so yeah, there's a couple of like workflow questions, and I'm not sure if we are going to be able to answer them, because again, like, it just falls into the same realm of like, hey, what do you do with like software X to get the right thing? There's a few questions, like more technical ones. Any plans to better support 4K monitor resolution? It's very difficult to navigate the UI on my desktop.
Yeah. So that is a great point. So the way the software Dev Studio is built, we don't have great 4K monitor support. That is true. Right now, we have to rely on you using the scaling. You know how you can go into your display settings and then set your scale, and we rely on people to use that for now. We actually the ability to support 4K won't be able to come until we go to Dev Studio 5.
What is that?
That's a great question. We keep working.
I don't want to get you in problems, so it's like
now. Right, yeah. It's in the future. It's always in the works. But the reason that we rely on that is because we use Qt for our interface stuff, and that engine we need to upgrade to the latest versions of Qt that support 4K. So anyway, unfortunately for now, you have to use your operating system's scaling settings to get Dev Studio to work on a 4K monitor.
Gotcha. There's one more question. Any hope to make Face Gen to work with the new Genesis, which is the face creator from Photos plugin? I have never used it.
I love Face Gen.
I have to look it up.
I can't remember. I know we've talked to them many times in the past about different things and worked with them. I'll have to look that one up. I'm not sure what the plans are for that.
Interesting. Yeah, I've never used it. I never tried it before. So FaceGen is basically you take a photo and you make a character out of it. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's pretty neat.
All right, I'll go look it up, because I have some photos to be converted, I guess. Okay, I'll go over one more and then we can wrap it up, I think. Any plans to make more of exports to work with ZBrush transpose system? Ooh. I wonder if it's more ZBrush question than DAZ 3D question. I'm curious.
So anytime we start talking about exporting or working with other applications, we generally base our decision on how many in our market space are requesting that. And this is actually the first time I've heard of this request. So that would suggest that no, we don't have anything in the works right now. But that's something that I'll have to bring up and say, hey, there's some interest in this, and get that ball rolling.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. Looking from, I run my own company with Andrew, and you're a guest of it right now with the Learn Squared. We do courses and we have live streams, and obviously for the live streams themselves, I tend to be very subjective on who's getting invited, because I always want to talk with people that are really interesting, or with the developers of the software that I love and that kind of stuff. But when we look at the courses, like, there's always this question that we ask, what does our students want? And sometimes we follow, like, we try to follow that because obviously that's the market, to put it like harshly. And sometimes we do our own decisions because, like, we just really want to make what we really want to make. But yeah, that makes sense. Like, hey, let's do this. Let's spend a time of 20 people to work for 2 weeks straight to get support for a thing that only one person's going to be using. So
right.
Makes no sense.
It's always hard. Yeah. I mean, it's being a customer facing individual here at our company. Of course, I get a lot of requests for different things, and a lot of them I agree with them all. Yeah, I would love to have that. But in the end, of course, there are people that say, well, okay, we only have so many developers and so many hours in a day, so we're going to focus on these other things that might have, more market appeal. But yeah, it is great to get suggestions from people because we focus mostly on our own software, and then that's where we work all day. And so
Yeah.
it's good
Yeah.
to know
Yeah.
what else people like.
That makes sense, man. Cool. All right, let's wrap it up here. There's quite a few questions. I have a ton of questions I'm gonna ask you like after the stream, obviously. I definitely want to iron out some of ideas that I have on how to use the software, how to use Dash 3D in relation to different softwares. So if you don't mind, I'll keep bugging you.
Yeah, let's get that stuff figured out.
And I'll extend my olive branch or whatever you say it in English and say like, hey, like if you would be interested, I would love to have you back, like maybe in a couple of months, when we get everything figured out and to really look at the those integration issues. Like, okay, maybe it's not working with the one click, but here is a remedy on how to do it specifically with, let's say, 3ds Max or Marvelous Designer or Blender, whatever have you. So if you would be interested in that, I would love to have you back. So
I definitely love the idea of coming back and having very specific targeted answers so that people can see that we have something useful.
No, I mean, look, I've already learned quite a few things that will probably occupy like next week of my time to figure things out, specifically with FBX, for instance, or even looking into Alembic, because those are the ideas that for one person might seem pretty obvious, but until you actually talk with someone who's knowledgeable and sort of like has the right method of thinking, you would never stumble upon that idea. So it's been great for me so far.
So it's great. Yeah,
so it's all good. Awesome, man. Thanks for your time. Thanks for hopping on and being a guest here. I'm really excited about what's next because I really want to figure it out. I have some big ideas, and usually my big ideas happen when I have the most projects with the deadlines that I have to finish. It's just really interesting way of how my brain works. Like, oh, you're busy? Oh, let's just throw in some couple of like ideas in your head, so you're not gonna focus on the work, but you're gonna focus on your personal work instead.
Right.
It's always like that. But anyways, hey man, thanks for coming in, and nice to meet you too, because that's actually the first time we're talking.
That's true. Yeah,
and I'm pretty sure it's not gonna be the last one. So
yeah, this is great. Appreciate it.
All right, man. Thanks again, and thanks guys for joining. Thanks for being here with us, and the Learn Squared streams are back. I'll be streaming some more. I cannot commit to specific schedule yet, but I'll definitely try to keep it as often as possible. And there's certain projects that I want to work on and have you guys be part of it. And we're gonna have a couple of more classes coming out very soon. We have class from Milan there's going to be a creature design class that is coming up pretty soon. We have a few more instructors that we have in works that are going to be great. I'm pretty sure you guys are going to be excited about those too. So yeah, just keep your eyes peeled. I'll definitely post about future streams so you guys are aware ahead of time when they happen. And yeah, thanks for joining, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.